Coming up, justice delayed is justice denied. Why does it take so long to bring an accused child killer to court?
You're listening to Brent's Two Cents, the semi-serious thoughts of a guy in Belize. And now here's the host of this podcast from somewhere in Belize City, Brent Toombs.
Hey, welcome to the podcast for the week of June the 21st. Well, while most Belizeans were captivated by the story of Jasmine Harton for the first few weeks of this month, there was another Jasmine who seems to have been completely forgotten by the media, the public at large, and perhaps most unfairly, the justice system in Belize. June the 6th marked the 9th anniversary of the discovery of the remains of 13-year-old Jasmine Lowe, a young child from Santa Elena who went missing after leaving her father's house en route to visit her mother. After a frantic 2-day search and several dead-end leads, Jasmine's body was found in some bushes near a farm on the Cristo Rey Road. 2 weeks later, San Ignacio police finally made a breakthrough in their investigation after numerous female minors reported that a man had offered them money in an attempt to lure them into his vehicle. With the help of citizens, police subsequently located the suspect vehicle in the area of Branchmouth in Cayo. When police approached and opened the vehicle, they found a 28-year-old man partially undressed with his penis exposed and in the company of a 12-year-old girl. The man was immediately detained and his car was towed to the police station in San Ignacio. And while the man was being charged with 1 count of abduction, 11 counts of common assault, and 1 count of aggravated assault, his car was being searched for any additional evidence of criminal activity. That's when police found a ring that reportedly belonged to Jasmine Lowe. Wednesday, June 20th, 2012, is one of those days that many of us will always remember exactly where we were when we heard that Bert Vasquez had been charged for the murder of Jasmine Lowe. Probably no group of people will have stronger memories of that day than the 1,000 or so who gathered at the foot of the police station in San Ignacio to voice their demand that justice be served. It was truly a remarkable day. Because when you live in a country where so many violent crimes go unsolved and the conviction rate for homicide is less than 10%, well, the arrest of an alleged child killer such as Bert Vasquez is a pretty big deal. Especially when you consider how the murder of Jasmine Lowe galvanized our nation in grief for a few weeks back in June of 2012. The indictment of Vasquez was the victory we so desperately needed at the time. Finally, for once, a very, very bad man had been caught. The police had the evidence they needed to make a charge stick. The Director of Public Prosecutions assured us that there was DNA evidence and other forensics that would guarantee a conviction. Vasquez would be going down. Sure, maybe we would never get justice for all the other murdered children in Belize, such as Shirley Nicholas, or Jackie Malik, or Naomi Hernandez, or Jay Blades, or Erica Wills. And no doubt there would continue to be scores of accused killers who would waltz out of court, and even more murderers who would never even get charged for their crimes. But not this time. Not Bert Vasquez. At least this one scumbag was going to pay for what he did. And then, nothing happened. Not for 9 years and counting. Vasquez has yet to be brought to trial for the murder of Jasmine Lowe. And for the past 9 years, Jasmine's father, Chris, and her mother, Marisol, have had to wait to see if justice will ever be served on the man accused of taking the life of their little girl. Today, Jasmine would be 22 years old. She would have graduated high school and gone to her prom. She was a very good student and likely would have finished university by now. Maybe she might have already started her own family, but at the very least, she would have been an aunt to her sister's children. Now, people who have lost a child will tell you that you never get over that loss. But I can't begin to imagine how much harder it must be every birthday, every Christmas, every special occasion, and every 6th of June, without at least that bit of closure that hopefully comes once your child's killer is convicted for their crime. But for 9 years, that justice has been delayed. For the family of Jasmine Lowe, justice has been denied. In 2014, Vasquez's then attorney, Simeon Sampson, tried to have the case against his client dismissed, arguing that there was no direct evidence against Vasquez. The court disagreed, and Vasquez was committed to stand trial in the Supreme Court. By 2016, Vasquez had a new attorney, Oscar Salgado, a lawyer with a well-earned reputation for finding ways to get his clients acquitted. In an interview with Channel 7, Salgado even boasted that he was the only attorney in Belize's history to win acquittals at 8 consecutive murder trials. Salgado said he was confident that he'd be able to get Vasquez set free. But first, Salgado and Vasquez had other matters before the court. You see, the murder of Jasmine Lowe was not the first time Vasquez had been charged with a major crime. In 2011, Vasquez was charged with 2 separate incidents of forcible abduction, attempted rape, and indecent assault against 2 women, one of whom was only 16 years old. In 2017, Bert Vasquez was convicted of forcible abduction and aggravated assault of an indecent nature and was sentenced to 10 years for the first count and 3 years for the second. Both sentences were to run concurrent, meaning he would only spend 10 years in prison for those crimes. This is when it appears that Salgado stopped representing Vasquez. I'll explain why that's important in a moment. In 2018, Vasquez was unrepresented when he managed to beat the second charge of forcible abduction. But he was convicted of attempted rape, and Justice Colin Williams sentenced him to an additional 4 years. Only this time, consecutive to the 10 years Vasquez was already serving. So you might think the fact that Vasquez is not going anywhere until at least 2031 is the reason why the justice system is dragging its feet to bring him to trial for the murder of Jasmine Lowe. I mean, what's the rush now, right? Well, apparently, the reason why things have ground to a halt where Bert Vasquez is concerned is because he doesn't have a lawyer anymore. You know how on TV the cops always tell the person being arrested that if they can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for them? Well, that's not so in Belize. You can be criminally tried for any charge except one without being represented by an attorney. Murder is the only charge where the accused must have a lawyer, and that is only required at the trial phase. But Belize does not have public defenders the way they do in other wealthier countries. So if you're charged with murder in Belize and you truly cannot afford a lawyer, then the Supreme Court will assign an attorney to defend you. And that seems to be the roadblock for the Vasquez murder trial. In October of 2019, Vasquez told reporters that not only can his family not afford an attorney, but no lawyer is willing to represent him. Now, I'm not sure what sort of proof is required to satisfy the court that you can't afford your own attorney, but I wouldn't be surprised if the court does not consider Vasquez to be exactly indigent. His uncle, with whom Bert is reportedly still close to, owns a TV station. His mother, who continues to stand by her son, told Channel 5 in January of 2019 that she has been trying to hire an attorney, but that everyone she speaks with declines to take her business. But whether or not Vasquez has the resources to hire an attorney or not, it's well beyond time that the court should just take matters into their own hands and assign his case to someone. Anyone. But of course, that is easier said than done. Clearly, no lawyer, not even Oscar Salgado, it appears, wants to be the attorney of record when Bert Vasquez is eventually tried for the murder of Jasmine Lowe. I'm sure any attempt by the registrar to assign his case to a lawyer will be met with a plethora of excuses about why they can't accept this assignment. An assignment where the total legal fees would be capped at $1,000. But I don't think it's money or the lack of it why every criminal defense attorney in Belize appears to want nothing to do with Bert Vasquez. I think they are worried that they might win, that Vasquez will get acquitted and they will become one of the most reviled people in Belize, forever known as the lawyer that helped Bert Vasquez get away with murdering a child. Now, I am definitely not saying that Vasquez has been wrongly accused, even if legally he must be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But the case against him is most definitely not as cut and dry as the police and public would want to believe. There is no eyewitness who saw Vasquez with Jasmine Lowe. We still don't know what DNA evidence may exist. The coroner could not even establish a cause of death, something that is crucial when you're trying to convict a person of committing murder. The only thing we know about is a ring that the police say they found in Vasquez's car. A ring that the police seemed to be very eager to let the media know about at the time. A ring that the mother of Jasmine Lowe seemed very deliberate and yet somehow awkward when describing it to reporters in June of 2012. Again, I am not suggesting that Vasquez is innocent, but I'm not completely comfortable with how quickly everyone was to assume his guilt, especially with the benefit of hindsight. Because if there is no will to get Vasquez into court to finally answer to the charge of murder, then maybe it's because the DPP doesn't think they can get a conviction. Now look, I don't have any sympathy for Vasquez. Whether or not he murdered Jasmine Lowe, he is clearly a menace to society. And Belize is a much safer place with him behind bars, at least until 2031. But kicking his murder case down the road for the next decade is simply not acceptable. Justice delayed is justice denied. But for the family of Jasmine Lowe, it's nothing less than absolute cruelty to make them wait 9 years for justice with no indication of how many more years they will still have to wait. And speaking of justice delayed, what the hell is going on with the case against Anke Doehm? It's been 4 years since Anke and David Doehm were charged in relation to the death of their 13-year-old daughter, Faye Lin Cannon, in San Pedro. Faye Lin was found dead in her bedroom, and a post-mortem investigation indicated that she had been physically and sexually abused. To the outrage of everyone, the Doehms were only charged with cruelty to a child and were released on bail of $10,000 each. Now, David Doehm did the world a favor by committing suicide in a hotel room a few months later, but Anke Doehm remains free to drift about while her case gets repeatedly adjourned for reasons that are never explained. Unlike Vasquez, the issue is definitely not a lack of representation, because, as I mentioned, Doehm was never charged with murder. But I don't know if she's been inside a courtroom since September of 2018, when she was trying to convince the court to adjust the conditions of her bail and allow her to return to the United States to visit her doctor. At that time, Doehm was represented by no less than Dickie Bradley. A few weeks later, she withdrew the request to leave the country. According to the San Pedro Sun, after adjournments in January 2020 and then May 2020, and then of course COVID-19, Anke Doehm's trial was supposed to begin in January of 2021, which obviously never happened. So my question for the DPP or the Registrar of the Supreme Court or whoever waves the magic wand that determines who actually goes to trial is, when will Anke Doehm be made to face the charge against her? When will there be justice for Faye Lin Cannon? Because I am sick and tired of seeing Anke Doehm in coffee shops and stores and walking along the seawall like she doesn't have a goddamned care in the world. I am tired of biting my tongue instead of using it to give her a piece of my mind every time I see her out in public. Because just like Vasquez, Doehm is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. And the people whose responsibility it is to prove her guilt don't seem to be in a hurry to get on with doing their job. But mostly, I am fed up with waiting for a court system that moves at glacial speed, with seemingly no regard for innocent victims like Jasmine Lowe and Faye Lin Cannon. They deserved much better. Those children and their families deserve justice with no further delays.
We want to hear from you. You can find Brent's 2 Cents on Twitter and Facebook at 2 Cents Belize, or email us at podcast@oshaproductions.com. That's OXAProductions.com.
Okay, as always, it's time to big up all the other Belizean podcasters who have put out new content recently. Andre Hibet and Digna Ramirez have a brand new episode of Mud of Fire, continuing their discussion on banning gill nets in Belize. And Tyler J. Bermudez from the Real Thai Belize podcast talks about the continuing saga of Patrick Faber and how the Commissioner of Police finally got vaccinated. I'll post links to both those podcasts in the notes for this episode. On a personal note, I want to say thank you to everyone who listened and shared last week's episode of Brent's 2 Cents with special guest Charisse Halsell from Channel 7 News. That episode is already the second most listened to episode of this podcast, getting downloaded nearly 900 times in the first 7 days. That also pushed the total number of downloads for Brent's 2 Cents past the 15,000 mark, which is a remarkable milestone for an independent podcast from Belize to reach in just under a year. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everyone who has been listening and supporting this podcast. I also want to give a big thank you to Spencer for buying me a few more cups of coffee. That's 2 weeks in a row. Wow, thank you, Spencer. I also want to say thanks to Diana for chipping in to support this podcast as well. If you want to join amazing listeners like Spencer and Diana to help cover the costs of producing this podcast, you will find a link for Buy Me a Coffee in the description for this episode. Remember, you can be part of the podcast movement in Belize by sharing Brent's 2 Cents with at least one person who otherwise may not know about it. And don't forget to subscribe to all the great Belizean podcasts out there on your favorite app, so you never miss an episode from anyone. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at 2 Cents Belize. And I would especially love it if you would leave a voice message for the podcast about anything you want to talk about. And that's going to do it for episode 34 of Brent's 2 Cents. Until next time, please continue to wear your masks, wash your hands, get vaccinated when it's your turn, and most importantly, be nice to each other.
Brent's 2 Cents is a presentation of OSHA Productions, Belize's affordable professional video production company.